Today, I'm going to show you how you can save thousands of dollars on your AWS bill by using S3 tiers correctly. And if you're working for a company and you help them save the money on their AWS bill, that's a good line on your contribution log for this year, so you could have some data when you're asking for the promotion next year. A lot of you may not know, but whenever you upload files to S3 bucket, they automatically go to what's called S3 standard tier. And we can see here on the pricing page that the price about 2.3 cents per gigabyte. And then it goes down, more you upload. But did you know that if you change the tier to which your files are uploaded, you can save quite a bit of money? For example, if we scroll down and go to S3 standard infrequent access, we can cut our costs by basically half. Well, obviously, it comes with some downsides because otherwise we may have just uploaded everything to the cheapest tier. So let's look at how these tiers work. With the help of markdown2image.com, I've made this little table that converted my markdown table to this image. So we can evaluate each tier and see their price and the downsides and what things they provide. So let's start with S3 standard. As we already discussed, it costs about 2.3 cents per gigabyte. It's probably the one you want to use most of the times, especially if your application retrieves the files very frequently. So as you can see, the use case is hot data frequently accessed. Basically, if it's accessed daily or weekly, you probably want to keep those files in the S3 standard. If you notice though, there are three other columns: minimum storage, retrieval speed, and retrieval fee. Let me explain what minimum storage means. Whenever it says 30 days or 90 days or 180 days, it means that if your file has been in that tier even for a day, you're still gonna be charged like it has been there for the whole 38, 90, 180 days. Now, the retrieval speed, it's how long it takes your application to retrieve these files based on the S3 tier. And then the retrieval fee, as I said, nothing comes for free. So the retrieval fee is how much you pay extra if you, for some reason, need to actually retrieve those files, you move to cheaper tiers. Okay, so we've discussed standard. It's probably the one you want to use most of the time, but you don't want to use it all the time, probably because you most likely have a bunch of files that never get accessed, or maybe they get accessed once a month or once every 3 months, whatever. So what we would want to do is after, say, 30 days, if the file has existed in S3 bucket for 30 days, we probably want to move it to a cheaper tier. And most likely the candidate is going to be the standard infrequent access. What does that mean? Well, that means that we're going to save half the costs on the storage itself, but if we ever need to actually retrieve the file, we will still save on the storage costs, but for each retrieval, we're now going to pay 1 cent per gigabyte. And we still maintain the milliseconds retrieval speed. To the customers, it will feel like nothing ever happened, and we'll just have to eat the cost on 1 cent per gigabyte retrieval. Now, there is the thing called one zone infrequent access. As you can see, it is even cheaper than the standard infrequent access, but the downside is that if for some reason the availability zone goes down, and availability zone, just think of it as a data center. So if it goes down and your data was in there, well, unfortunately, you no longer will have that data. Yes, they do make backups on other devices, so unless the data center is like burnt by a fire or maybe aliens took it, you probably are safe, but most likely you don't want to use it for your critical data because of that single availability zone risk. And as I mentioned, it basically is cheaper than two others we just discussed, and it maintains the 1 cent gigabyte fee per retrieval with milliseconds retrieval speed. Now we're getting to even cheaper ones, and they're called S3 Glacier. So there's instant, flexible, and deep archive. We could potentially move our reports to S3 Glacier Instant after 3 months, for example, because it's unlikely that our customers will need to look at the reports past 90 days, and if they do, we'll just eat the cost of 1 cent per gigabyte per retrieval. And as you can see, we can save quite a bit of money on storage, and we still maintain the milliseconds retrieval speed. So that's actually a pretty good deal. You might ask though, why can't we just put everything in S3 Glacier Instant? We could, But again, what's going to kill you is the retrieval fee, because as you can see with the S3 standard, there's no such thing. And also the minimum storage requirement. So if you ever actually delete the files, so if they don't stay in your S3 buckets forever, then even if that file existed in this S3 bucket at that tier, even for like an hour, you're still going to get charged for the full 90 days. And then we have the S3 Glacier Flexible and Deep Archive. And most likely, either of those, you will only want for the data you just want to maintain for some auditing, for example, but you probably don't want to use it for the data that may be sometime accessed by the customers. Because, as you can see, the retrieval speed is pretty rough. It's minutes to hours for the flexible one and up to 12 hours for the deep archive. So unless you need to save these files in case IRS comes to audit you, then probably you won't need to use these tiers and you should probably just stick to the top 4. And let me show you some math about how much you can actually save. We will use the example of 1 petabyte or 1000 terabytes of data, and we think that we'll move about 80% of such data to a cheaper tier. So as you can see, original cost for the standard is $276,000 per year. It's pretty rough just to store some files. Well, we could move 80% of it to the standard infrequent access. And as you can see, we can actually cut our bill by 36% or $100,000. Just by doing that. And obviously, you may not have this exact math because it will vary on case-by-case basis, and you need to do your own math to figure out how often you should be moving these files and how much you can save. And then, as you can see, deeper you go, I guess deeper because of Deep Archive, more money you can save, but as I mentioned, you will probably stick to the top 3. I have to be honest. This is if you have predictable access patterns of your files. But sometimes you may not have that. Well, for that, AWS allows what's called S3 intelligent tiering. But of course, it does not come for free. So as you can see, it may automatically move things for you, but it will still cost you 2.5 cents per 1,000 objects. And then, of course, AWS will charge you the fees to move things between storage tiers. Again, you'll just have to do a little math. I just want to show you what's available. How would you go about automatically moving these files from one tier to another based on date? Obviously, you're not going to do it for every file individually by yourself, because that's going to take you years, if not longer, depending on the number of files you have. So I created this bucket, doesn't have any files. We don't actually need to have them. But what we will do if we want to configure automatic moves between the S3 tiers is we would go to our S3 bucket, we will go to management. And what we're after, it's called Lifecycle rules. So we will click Lifecycle rule. We give it the rule name. For example, 30 days standard infrequent access. And then you can either limit the scope based on some filter. For example, you can only do this for the files that start with a certain prefix, or you can apply it to all the objects. And then we figure out what we want to do. We want to move current versions of objects between storage classes. I actually just noticed this option, but we can also transition non-current versions of objects between storage classes. And we may want to do that. And we actually may want to create a new lifecycle policy that moves them to an even cheaper tier, because most likely we don't care about milliseconds retrieval speed for those. And then we will just acknowledge that the lifecycle rule will incur transition cost per request, because as I mentioned, nothing ever comes for free. And then it gives us a little warning that objects less than 128 kilobytes will not transition to any storage class because they did the math for us and they said it doesn't make sense. You will actually lose money if you do that. And then we just figure out which tier we want to transition to. So most likely your first one will be standard infrequent access, and then let's say 30 days. And that's it. You'll just create a rule and AWS will automatically look at all the files in your S3 bucket and start moving them. And this is it. You'll just hit create rule and AWS will automatically figure out which files need to transition already. And then it will keep checking every day if the files need to be moved between the tiers. And this is how you can save money on your AWS bill just by knowing how to use different S3 tiers. And hopefully, once you've done that, you will be on your way to a big pay raise next year or even a promotion. And if you have not watched my last video on how to run DynamoDB locally, then go watch it.